how's it going, everybody? It's Pastor Tim. Hey guys, I'm so sorry that we've had to cancel so much. This weather is just not getting any better. But I do not want to stop learning with you guys. I'm so sorry that we're not going to have church tonight, but I was hoping that maybe I could do a video lesson for you guys so we can continue our study on fake ID. If you have missed, we've been talking about idolatry and the things that we put our faith in when we should really be putting our faith in God. I think a lot of times when we think of idols, we think of these statues, whether it's wood or metal or whatever it may be. But in reality, we have our own idols today. And the first week we talked about the idol of the self and how we carefully craft our image with makeup or maybe a certain look, or I've got to work out to look a certain way so that we can be something, right? I'm not saying that those things are bad, but ultimately we do those things so that we would have value, when in reality God's saying you already have value. And we're putting our stock in those things instead of listening to God. And so our self, right, our self-image becomes our idol. And then the next week we talked about the idol of stuff and how we think that we're not rich, but in reality, compared to the rest of the world, we are so rich here. And we have so many things that we put our faith in, so much stuff that we put our faith in that we don't even realize it. We looked at these statistics and it said that if you've got some change in your pocket, which I do, I have to carry quarters around because my wife, Caitlin, likes gumballs. So if we're ever anywhere that has a bubble gum machine, I've got to make sure I've got a quarter in my pocket. And you can ask her about that, that's true. But anyway, if you've got change in your pocket, like I obviously do, you're in the top 70% of the richest people in the world. And so we looked at this idol of stuff and how we put our faith in so many things other than God, and we don't even realize it, especially here. And so you've got self, you've got stuff, and then tonight we're going to be looking at the idol of success. And right off the bat, no, I'm not telling you guys that success is bad, but it's where your priority is. Just like all the other idols, is it your God or are you doing it for God? And so we're looking all the way back in the Old Testament at the nation of Israel. So up until this point, in 1 Samuel chapter 8 is where we're going to be. Up until this point, Israel has been guided by God. God is their king. God brought them out of Egypt. God brought them out of the wilderness into the promised land, right? He's always constantly guiding them and saving them and defeating their enemies, right? God is their champion, right? He's their king. And we get to this point where Israel is wanting to look like everybody else, right? That isn't enough anymore for Israel. And so they come to Samuel, who's the prophet at the time, and they say, Samuel, give us a king to lead us, right? They want to have a king, and Samuel doesn't like this because he's like, you already have a king. You have God. You have the God of the universe, the most powerful being in the cosmos, and yet you want to have a king? This doesn't make sense. And so Samuel goes to God, and he tells him this, and it says in verse 7 of chapter 8, it says, and the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. And so Samuel goes to talk to the nation of Israel, and he's like, all right, you guys can have a king. God said you guys can have a king. But he tells them about this king first, and he lists all these things that are just terrible. And if you know anything about Israel's first king, Saul, he's not a very good guy. He's got all kinds of pride, and he tries to kill David a couple of times, and he steals for himself. He keeps things for himself, and he's just not a good person. And Samuel tells them all about this. This is not going to be a good thing, but yet they still persist. And it says that the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us. And here's why. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles. God was not enough for them anymore. They thought that if they had a certain look, if they looked successful, then they would actually have something. And what's incredible is they say that they'll have somebody that will go out before us and fight our battles. God's been doing that throughout their entire history. God has been fighting all of their battles way better than they could, like throwing fire everywhere and putting disease on a bunch of people. Right? It's just crazy. Some stuff that they could never do. God has protected them, but that's not enough. They want to have the look. I have to look successful. God, we don't really look successful right now because we don't have a king. And that's what's happening here, is they want to have the look of success, even though God has made them successful because God is the one going before them. And what's really sad is by them choosing that king instead of God, it says, as he had said to Samuel back in verse 7, it is not you that they have rejected, but they have rejected me. See, when we choose to be successful so that we can be something, we choose that success over God. We reject God. Let me tell you why that's a problem. When I was growing up, I was not the biggest kid. All right, I was an itty bitty guy. I had a really high-pitched voice, and I wore Harry Potter glasses. I was not intimidating by any means, but I would constantly imagine myself in certain situations. So maybe I couldn't go talk to that bully or stand up to that bully, or maybe I couldn't go across the room to talk to that girl, or whatever it may be. I would constantly imagine myself of, well, maybe if I was tough, and I would put myself in these situations in my mind. And I loved this TV show called Doug. If you guys have been in my office, you guys have seen this guy. This was a gift to me from my brother because of the fact that I watched this show all the time. But what Doug did was the same thing. I think the reason why I liked that show was because I could relate with Doug. Doug was the weird, unpopular new kid with a big nose that had his own bullies and that had his own situations, and he would never be able to actually do what he imagined. Doug would constantly, you would hear this sound effect, it would go like, and like the screen would get all wavy, and it would show Doug and what he would hope, what he wished would happen, right? And so if he had a bully, you can see like he would imagine himself as like this Indiana Jones character named Race Canyon, and he would do all this crazy stuff to get out of a situation, or maybe he had to go get something somewhere, and so he would see himself as a secret agent or whatever it may be, and he would constantly imagine himself in these really cool situations, but then he would wake up. And same thing with me when I was a little guy, then I would wake up and reality would set in. And what's incredible is even though we, Doug and I, thought that that's what would be successful, that's never what happened, right? You never saw Doug actually become some Indiana Jones guy in the middle of his school and start doing stuff, right? Probably because he'd go to jail. But that never actually played out. And what's interesting is what actually played out ended up being better. By the end of the story, you see that a better moral is made when he went out what was actually going to happen. Same thing right here for Israel. What God wants for them was something better, and they were trying to put their faith in something that they thought would give them something, right? Maybe that's you. Maybe you're putting yourself in a situation where you think, I've got to look this certain way so that way I can be something, right? I have to make myself look a certain way. Or maybe it's your stuff. I have to have certain things. Tim, I don't have the latest and greatest clothing or phone or whatever it may be. I don't have the latest and greatest stuff. Or maybe you're saying success. Maybe you think, Tim, I've got to go to college because if I don't go to college, I can't be something. I can't be successful. Or, Tim, if I don't join the football team and become that star quarterback, I can't be something. Or maybe it's band and choir and theater. Maybe you think, man, if I don't have that star role, if I'm not that first seat, or if I don't have the solo, I'm not actually something. I'm not going to stand out. And God is saying, I've already made you something. God created us in His image, and if you're a Christian, 2 Corinthians 5:17 says that He recreated you, right? You are a new creation in Christ, and yet we constantly go after things that we know are not going to satisfy, that we know are not going to actually be good. Just like Israel thinking, maybe if I've got a king, I'm going to look good. And if you guys know the history of Israel, it didn't turn out that way, and actually they got destroyed. And if we put our faith in those things, that's what's going to happen. If you put your faith in your image, you're going to get old. Maybe you're going to get hurt. If you put your faith in your success, maybe you're not going to get the best grades. Maybe you're in sports and you actually get injured. If you put your faith in your stuff, maybe you don't have that stuff. Maybe you can't get that stuff. God is saying, put your faith in me. And so while I'm not saying that success is bad, I'm not saying that college is bad. I'm not saying that sports or choir or band or theater are bad. I'm not saying that. But ultimately, you have to ask yourself, why are you doing those things? Are you doing those things to look like everybody else because you think that if I look a certain way, then I'm something? Or are you doing those things with the reality that you know God has already made you something? Are you doing those things to glorify God, or are you doing those things to glorify yourself? Ultimately, you have to ask yourself, which one is your God?